Welcome to Fully Exposed, a podcast that explores the taboo and unconventional in an attempt to educate your ass. I'm your host, Jessica Beuker. Let's get started.
Welcome to Fully Exposed. Oh, maybe I should do like my best impression of you.
Oh yeah, I can't wait to hear it.
Should I do that? Okay,
yeah.
Here we go. Welcome to Fully Exposed. That's not good. Okay, so welcome to Fully Exposed. I'm Liz Noble. I am your host for this episode, and with the guest today, who is the usual host of Fully Exposed, Jess Beuker. So I guess I should flip this question back to you because you always start with, tell me a little bit about yourself. So Jess Beuker, not
Yes.
Beuker, Beuker, spelt
Thank
Beuker.
you. Spelt Beuker. Thank you for saying my name correctly. That's very.
Oh, you're welcome.
That's
You
very
taught me.
important. I taught you. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel like once you yell at people enough about it, it eventually starts to stick.
Yeah, I think that's how I kind of picked it up. Was I was like in the office and I heard a very like stern conversation about that it wasn't Beuker, it's Beuker, and I was like, note taken.
Good to know. Now I know. Yeah. A little about myself. So, how far back are you wanting me to go?
I'm thinking about
here?
like from the womb. No,
Yeah.
I'm just don't do that. Don't
day
do
I was
that.
born. No, so I'm from Saskatchewan,
Mm-hmm.
and I grew up there. I moved to Toronto when I was 19 to study journalism. I went to Ryerson University, and that was fun. I took a lot of, while I was studying journalism for my electives, I took a lot of sociology classes and philosophy classes, which I feel like kind of kickstarted my foray into being really interested in like social politics and things like that.
Those were electives. Like you personally chose to take them?
Yes.
Okay. No, that's cool.
Yeah.
So
And
they
were-
Was that something that you were interested in before? Is it just like you're reading course descriptions and you're like, you know what? This just sort of speaks to me.
To be honest, no. This is going to sound like insanely superficial, but so like growing up, I hated watching the news. I'm not like a history person. I didn't like politics, was never interested in any of that kind of thing. And then when I got to university, there's a lot of like questionable courses that I feel like they just
Totally.
kind of add in there to have courses to offer. And one of them was a sociology class, but it was like pop culture. So I thought it was just going to be like, yay, we like watch movies and like television shows all day. And it was that, but it was also like dissecting the way that pop culture like represents certain minorities and like women and, you know, people from the LGBTQ community and things like that. And so it was really interesting. That's kind of, I feel like, one of the things that kickstarted it, because I am a bit of a pop culture junkie and I watch a lot of movies and I watch a lot of TV. And I thought it was really interesting to actually start taking a deeper look and dissecting the stuff that we consume so much of on a daily basis. And so after I took that one, then it kind of like opened the door and I started taking a ton of other courses. I also took a philosophy class that was like philosophy of life, death, and poverty. And that one kind of stuck out to me because it was a lot of really controversial issues. And
So you're just like thrown into the controversy, just like getting
yeah. And growing up, like I always wanted to be a lawyer when I was younger. And
wow.
my parents thought I should be a lawyer because I'm very good at arguing. So that was kind of one of the classes that stuck out to me because I was like, oh, yes, this sounds like a debate class. Like throw me in it and like we'll have some good debates. And it was really interesting. And it definitely challenged your own ideas and like opinions. And a lot of people, there were a lot of really interesting debates, and a lot of people I feel like kind of had their eyes opened about some of the stuff that we talked about.
Cool. And what about writing though? Like you were there for journalism, right?
I was there for journalism. So the writing portion. I've been interested in writing probably since I was like a very small child. I have memories all the way back to like grade 2, grade 3 of just like loving when we got to do creative writing assignments and stories, and I would always go above and beyond. And my introduction to writing started out definitely creative. I loved writing poetry. I loved writing narratives, short stories, all that kind of thing. again, like I said, I didn't like watch the news and I didn't really kind of care about that. I was just in my own little bubble. So until I think the only reason when I was like choosing a university that I was like, oh, I'll do journalism is because it was the only way in my head that I could see a way to keep my like love of writing and storytelling, but also like go to school for something or actually study something that could potentially get me a job. Because you don't like, how do you become a novelist, right? Like you can't guarantee that as being your career, right? And I can't just be like a poet. I'm not going to be a bard, like just like spouting my poems on the side of the street corner. So this was like something where I was like, okay, I can like study writing in a way. So that's kind of why I chose journalism. It was, again, a very like not super well thought out thing. It just like kind of happened.
Oh, so like the law school thing was more your parents really thought that you should do that, but like that never stuck for you.
No, I wanted to do it as well. And up until it was probably actually my family that maybe not talked me out of it, but like made me realize that that probably wasn't for me. Because I had just thought that like, first I wanted to do criminal law because I was like, that's going to be really interesting. And then it was actually my nan that was like, well, what happens when you get somebody that like you yourself are convinced is guilty and you have to defend them. And like, I can't even cheat in a board game. Like my conscience weighs too heavily. So I was like, that's not for me. Like I couldn't do that. I can't be a scumbag. So you've
like never ever cheated in a board game?
No, I don't cheat.
Do you know what I used to do?
What?
Have you ever played the game Candyland?
Like a long, long time ago.
So there's like a very specific order that the cards are supposed to be laid out in, and the stack or whatever, right? Like, okay, so I was very young, like in our first home, so probably 6, maybe 5, and my family left the room, and I counted how many I would have to get to land on something, and then how many that would be. So I would like change the order of the cards, like.
See, like that's like
concerning,
commitment.
Right?
That's like really concerning.
I think the difference is like people like you become lawyers and then like people like me become criminals.
Yeah, that's true. And then like our paths cross and I have to defend you.
Yeah, which is
and I feel
unfortunate
really,
for you.
really beat up about it.
Because you're like, I know you're guilty.
I know you're guilty.
So the lawyer thing never panned out.
So the lawyer thing never panned out. Like family law was another thing. I was like, I'll be a family lawyer. And like for those who know me, I'm probably one of the most emotional people, and about really like just dumb stuff too. I get very emotional if I'm too excited, or if somebody else is crying.
I just can't handle it.
I just can't handle it. I'm like always crying, so I have to be like between like a 4 and a 7 to be like in a safe zone. Otherwise, if I'm too happy or I'm too sad, I'm crying. So I was like, I don't have the ability to be able to separate my job from my professional life from my personal life.
Okay.
And I kind of like that. I like being able, and it's funny because now I'm in journalism where they say, you know, you're supposed to be completely objective. So it's kind of interesting that I ended up going into that. But I just didn't like the idea of, I don't know, having to do things, I guess, that maybe went so far against the grain of my own personal values and principles. So that didn't pan out.
And so the decision to apply to journalism at Ryerson was like really like a quick one, or did you apply anywhere else? Like,
no. So yeah, it's like really weird looking back on it. We were having a family dinner with, it was my mom and myself and like a family aunt, like great aunt, and her spouse. And we were all having dinner, and he worked at Global, I believe in the advertising agency area, not actually like on camera or anything, but obviously being around that, like he knew a lot about journalism and that kind of thing. And at the time, I just knew that I kind of wanted to do something writing based, but I didn't want to go to school just for like an English degree, because what do you do with that? So I was like, I kind of want to do something that's because also when you go, especially at the University of Saskatchewan, I don't know if it's the same here, but when you get like just like an arts and sciences degree, it's just all electives essentially. For like 2 years, you're just taking like random courses, and you have to take some maths, you have to take some sciences. I was it's just like high school again, but like harder and with more studying and less sleeping. So I was like, no, there are a lot of classes that like I don't want to take. I'd rather just be in like a direct entry program where I'm actually getting like the education that I'm paying for. I'm actually learning the skills and the things that I want to learn. So I had decided kind of on journalism before this, but I was going to go to the journalism school at the University of Regina. However, for the first 2 years, I was like, well, I can live at home and not have to, pay rent somewhere. So how it works is you can actually do 2 years of undergrad at the University of Saskatchewan, which is in Saskatoon, where I lived. And then you could like reapply into the U of R, the University of Regina. And first of all, I hated that system because it made no sense to me that to get into the journalism program, it wasn't just direct entry. You still had to do 2 full years of that like arts and sciences. Yeah. And then
unnecessary.
Very unnecessary. And then after you do that, you're not guaranteed to get into the journalism program. So what happens if you take a bunch of bullshit classes and then you just don't get in?
It's like a waste of 2 years.
It seemed like a very big waste to me. So I had already applied to the U of S. I had a bit of a scholarship and whatever. I got in. I was like kind of set to go. And we had this dinner. And at this dinner, Wayne was the guy's name. And we were talking, and he was like, have you ever heard of Ryerson? And I was like, no.
What?
Ryer what? That was exactly my reaction.
I knew it. I was there. What? No, I wasn't.
And I was like, no, like, what's Ryerson? And he's like, well, like, it's in Toronto, it's downtown, and it's like very much an arts and culture school, and they have like the best journalism program in Canada, and like it's 4 years, and like you should really look into it. He had a niece or someone who had gone and really enjoyed the program, and he said it seems really suited to you, and I feel like you would thrive there. And of course at the time, like my mom's like, ha ha ha, like you're not moving to Toronto. And I went home and I thought about it, and I was like, you know what? I'm going to apply. Yes, I am. So I applied, and like I still think like I did apply, and that part was very real. But I still think it didn't really hit me or any of my family like until I got accepted. Like we were all just thinking like
that's
yeah, she applied to Ryerson. Not that they didn't think that I could get in, but I think it didn't really like dawn on us until like it actually happened.
That it was like a real
that it was a real thing. And instead of just like waiting to find out if I got in, I withdrew my application from the U of S, which looking back, don't do that, kids, because you should probably have a backup. So I just withdrew, and then I sat there waiting to see if I got in. And
you withdrew before you knew you got in.
Yep.
That's like an intense all-in moment.
Yeah, I don't really know what happened.
Where was the family dinner on that decision?
I don't know. I think I just like got home and I was like, guess what? I'm going to Ryerson now. Like, screw you, U of S, and like decline, and like couldn't use my scholarship then. And so I applied, and you have to do like a big profile and an essay and all these short answer questions and stuff because it's direct entry, right? So I'm not just going to take some schlub off the street. So I anyway, submitted all that. It was a very long process, but I found out, I want to say at like the end of July that I got in, and all of a sudden it was like, oh, I'm going to Ryerson. And then the next month sort of just went by so fast. I had to find a place to live. I lived in residence for the first year. I had never been, like, keep in mind, I was like freshly 19 and I had never been east of Saskatchewan.
And where you're from, is it like rural?
All I can think of when you say that is the rural juror.
Literally, as I was about to say it, I was thinking the rural juror.
The rural juror.
From 30 Rock.
From 30 Rock, for people who are like, what is happening?
I was like saying, I'm like, getting right into it. I was like, this is not a word I excel at saying. Is she saying the rural juror?
Yes.
So was it rural?
No, I get asked this a lot. No, Saskatchewan has a lot of small towns, yes. There's basically only 2 like cities, or what you guys would consider cities, because there the bar for a city is much lower. I think you only have to have a population of like 5,000 to be considered a city. That could be a wrong fact, but I do know that Melfort is considered the city of Melfort, and their population is only around 6,000. I was born there. Okay. And a large chunk of my family still resides there, but I did most of my growing up in Saskatoon. Mm-hmm. So I never considered it rural because, because I was still very much like in a city. I mean, not obviously much smaller than Toronto. The population's like 300,000, but still not when you think of like, oh, there's 5 streets because people are always very shocked. I'll be like, oh yeah, like I went to this concert, and they're like, oh, like that person came there, or I'll be like, oh yeah, I just got to go to the Sephora. They're like, you have a Sephora? Like people are just so shocked that I don't like live out of a grass hut.
Right.
So it never really seemed rural to me, but there was like my dad is a farmer, and so like my grandparents own a farm. So
you're a farmer's daughter.
I'm a farmer's daughter. There is a lot of farmland, and like driving from city to city, there's like fields that separate all the cities.
Did you ever consider being a farmer? I mean, it's like a family trade, right?
Yeah, no.
Never. Not once.
No. It's not once. I don't know if anyone's actually ever asked me that question. I feel like it was kind of mainly just like, first of all, it's very much seen as a male-dominated job.
Yeah, for sure.
There's
but
not
your grandmother would have been involved, like your
more so in like the house. So like my grandma had 12 kids, so she wasn't like out in the farm, like combining. She was like taking care of the 12 children
in the home,
which is a lot. They didn't have like farm animals. It's strictly seed farming. So yeah, it was mostly like a lot of my uncles were farmers. My grandpa was a farmer. Like my dad's a farmer. So it very much was a family business. It was never anything that I was like pressured to feel like, oh, one day the family business is going to be passed down.
Did you feel like it was open though?
Maybe if I wanted it to be, but I'd never expressed that interest. When I was really, really young, I used to like hang out in my dad's combine with him, and I'd plaster the walls with Spice Girls bubblegum stickers.
What's a combine?
It's
totally like I don't even know what it is.
It's like a tractor, so it's like used in like harvesting.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, it's probably those big things that you see on like those little like agricultural videos where they have like the spinny things.
Yes.
Yeah.
I do know what that is now.
Yeah.
It had Spice Girl stickers in it.
Yes.
That's the coolest combine ever.
Because I would sit, there was a little seat beside the main seat that I would sit in, and there I would just like eat my Spice Girls bubblegum, and like, you know, you got the stickers in it. So I would like stick it to the walls. No, they were stickers.
There were some tattoos though. You never got the tattoos?
I never got the tattoos.
What? I was covered in those. And like they would get really dirty because they'd pick up like all of the fluff. And there were just these like black patches all over my body. It was a weird summer. Yeah,
tattoos are gross.
Especially those kinds that are not real and they're just stickers.
That's what I meant. Not
on my.
I have a tattoo. I mean, like
nothing against tattoos. I don't know
the fake ones, because you're right. They're sticky and then they turn into like a glob of fuzz.
Yeah, they basically take on like all the smog in the air.
Yeah.
But anyway, stickers. That's good.
So I would like hang out with him. I had my own set of like coveralls. It was all very cute, but it would not be a job for me. I think sometimes people think of, especially when you say you're from Saskatchewan and then that your dad's a farmer, they're like, ha, 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 like Farmer Wilbur, of course he is. Mm-hmm. Like, and they think of it as almost like a kind of like a just silly stereotypical career. Mm-hmm. But it's like he works like 20-hour days during harvesting season, right? So that's very tough. If you have children, you know, or a spouse, you don't get to see them all that time because you're not coming home for dinner, right? You're eating your dinner alone in your combine. It's like the job kind of never really ends either. It's not like, oh, you get all winters off because there's snow on the ground. No, that's usually when like the seed cleaning happens and like the selling of your product. So it's very much a like 365 day a year job that you really don't get a break from. And especially during those really like heavy like harvesting seasons and spraying seasons and planting seasons, and there's all these different farming seasons. It's so tough and strenuous and just very, very exhausting from what I saw anyway. And I don't know if I necessarily was interested in agriculture enough or like loved it enough to devote that much time of my life to it.
You need to love that.
Because you would really, really need to love that in order to give up that much of your own life to it.
Mm-hmm. And it's like quite literally backbreaking for some people.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. So yeah, that sort of makes sense. I mean, if you're interested in like creative writing and doing things like that, it's not really the path you're going to take is to be out in a field, right?
No.
So that makes sense. And what about, did you ever consider yourself a podcast host?
No.
What's that been like? This new adventure that we're currently on?
It's a lot of fun. I think I didn't really know what podcasts were until probably I was in like university. Like they weren't really, and even now they're still very new to a lot of people. Mm-hmm. I'd say it's a perfect time for podcasts. They're finally kind of getting their
notoriety,
time
but
in
like
the spotlight. Yeah. I really loved. I like talking and I like having conversations with people, and I like the idea. I always liked the idea of radio. Mm-hmm. But that was kind of something like I would just hear the people on the radio and be like, what a fun job. Like they get paid to just like pick I literally thought your job, you got to pick every song that came out on the radio and then you could just talk about whatever you want. Like you could ask like poll of the day. Like, I don't know. And that's kind of what I thought it was. I thought it was just like hanging out, talking, and just like choosing the music that got to go on the radio. And so for a while I wanted to be a radio host because I was like, that sounds amazing.
Like as a kid?
Yeah. Well, as like a teenager, I was like, I'll just like play music all day and talk about whatever I want. And the world like has to listen to me if they're in their cars.
You will sit and you will listen.
You will sit and you will listen because all the other radio stations suck. So that was kind of a thing. And then I took radio when I was in J school, and that's a fancy term for journalism school.
Everyone's like, J school, where'd you go?
Jello school.
Jello school.
Yeah.
That's good.
So
that was a part of it, like the actual radio side of it. I guess like different media for journalism doesn't have to just be writing. So
no, they throw you into everything. So like I had to do television, I had to do online, I had to do like really, really newsy stuff, which I hated. I had to do feature writing, I had to do radio. Like you have to do it all. And then when you're in your third and fourth years, you can kind of start to choose which area you want to go into and then start kind of picking your classes based off that, like your senior classes. So I had tried radio and I really enjoyed it. It was a lot of fun, but that was just kind of that. Like I took that one class and I didn't really pursue it after that because I had always had like a stronger interest in writing. And I guess in my head, I never thought of like, why not do both? Mm-hmm. And then
well, I guess like when you walked in
and like mentioned to me about podcasts, like I was 110% so ready and like eager to jump on board because it's like uncharted territory. It's something I've never done before, which is really exciting. And I always loved the idea of trying new things at least once. And so I thought that would be like fun. And also it seemed to combine a lot of the elements, of radio and of writing and of journalism that I still love, but in a whole new medium.
Right. And so I think we should talk a little bit about how your internship out of school like rolled into your first sort of job and everything, like with a magazine, and how that's, has led us here, I guess. So what was your position?
So I did, so in my final year of journalism, one of the requirements is that you do a 6-week internship. You work at the Ryerson, which is their school paper, and then you do a 6-week internship. And I don't know like what was going on with my year, but like everybody in my class was having trouble finding an internship. It was becoming really difficult. You were supposed to find it yourself, and there was a teacher that would be appointed to you that would be like your advisor and kind of help you if you had questions. But you basically had to go out and land the internship yourself.
6 weeks is not very long either.
It is not. And they've been working on changing it, and I'm not sure if they have, but I've strongly been an advocate for the 12-week program because it doesn't, first of all, like I did not, and I don't want to like bash my school, but I did not love my experience at the Ryersonian just because I wasn't interested in that hard news. And not only is it like news, but you're also covering campus, like local campus news.
Which is not your thing.
Nothing really happens. Like it's
you
just
want the juicy stuff that's like outside of that, and like
the reason I like feature writing is because I care more about people and their stories and how those relate to the larger world, rather than just like, oh, you know, there was a car crash and this happened, or, you know, this happened, or Apple's selling their stocks, or there was a basketball game and here's what the scores were. Like that kind of news is important because people, of course, want to keep up with their sports and their entertainment news and their trending news and their world news. But it's also very saturated. There's a lot of that already, and it just wasn't something that I ever had those stories. It's so dry to write those stories. You don't get any type of creative reign. It's the who, what, where, when, why, and everything else is considered fluff, right? You can't use quote unquote flowery language, and you can't. They don't care about. It is very matter of fact. They don't care about the people. I shouldn't say they don't care, but the people that you're interviewing, they're essentially just there to be quotes for your story. You don't
really know anything
care about their
them.
mannerisms or, you know, their background or who they are. And that part just never really sat right with me because I love just like learning about people. And I think that that's the greatest way to kind of like dissect our society and to, if we can learn more about one another, I think that that's the only way that we're eventually going to start, you know, eliminating hate is just by kind of banishing ignorance and getting to know
knowledge and not just like
exactly
on the surface like button news, right? It's like we need deeper things.
So of course there's an importance for that, there's a place for that, but there wasn't a place for me in that. So I didn't like love my time there just because it wasn't really what I wanted to be doing, but like that's how it was. If you wanted to do an internship, you had to do the 6 weeks there. So I did 6 weeks I couldn't find an internship, first of all. I was like applying everywhere. And then it got to like the bottom of the barrel where I actually had my advisor sending me places. He sent me a place that was called, I can't remember the actual name, but it was something like something stable, and it was like a horse magazine. And I was like, oh God, no, like this is real bottom of the barrel stuff. First of all, I know nothing about horses. And
it was like an entire
Clydesdale,
magazine,
I know that's a type, but like
dedicated to horses.
Yeah, like it was like a horse magazine, and I was like, this is just, it's not, this is going to be really, really, really boring.
Right.
And also I'm going to be such a fish out of water. And
I didn't even know there was magazines for horses. Is it for horses or for...
Yeah.
Horses
like
read these.
for horses to read. Like all the content, there was like the best like carrot recipes. Do horses eat carrots?
Probably. I feel like I've seen that.
So that was kind of problematic. I was getting all of these suggestions from him, and they were just, but at the same time, you can't be too picky, right? So I was trying to keep my mind as open as possible, but also still find something that I knew that I would love doing and that I could give my all to. And then he had sent me a list of magazines, and there was about 5 of them on the list. And the one that jumped out to me most was the Plaid Zebra, because I was like, whoa, that sounds funky. So naturally, I went to their website.
And it was a zebra magazine. It was a magazine
for zebras. And I was like, this again. So it was like unconventional news, which I thought was really cool. It was very edgy. It was like interesting stories that I would actually want to read and actually want to share on my social media feed, and that I would actually like love to research and to write about. So I applied there and I got the internship, and the internship was great. I had a great time there. And then after that, I kind of like lucked out. The Plaid Zebra, it's still very much a startup, but at the time was like very, very new. And they didn't even really have interns at the time. I was like one of their, like a handful of their first. And at the time I did my internship, I was the only intern there. Which was kind of cool because I got to know the team a little bit better and kind of like showcase my talents and my skills. So after I had done the internship, on the very last day, the editor had actually called me because he wasn't in that day and asked if I wanted to get paid for writing. And I said, hell yeah.
And were you even graduated at this time?
I technically yes, but okay. I hadn't had like my graduation, but like school was done.
Wow.
It had just ended. And
so that's like a big moment.
Yeah. And it's interesting because at the time I hadn't considered, I was like, I don't know if I'm going to stay in Toronto. Maybe I'll, my roommate had like just moved out. I didn't really want to look for a new roommate. I was like, maybe I'll move someplace else, try living someplace else in Canada. And then this kind of like, it literally very much fell into my lap. Like I didn't have to apply. I didn't have to do an interview. I didn't have to do any of the things that are usually necessary to get a job. It was just there and offered to me. And so of course I took them up on that offer. And at the time it was only part-time. So I was a little bit worried about that. So I was like, oh, I'm going to have to work like 2 part-time jobs now. But it was basically only part-time for like a couple of weeks, and then they moved me into full-time
because things like went viral with some articles and stuff like that, right?
Yeah. And it was like picking up speed and things were doing really well, and they just wanted to be able to like push out more content, and like for that to happen they needed me to be there writing more often. And then we kind of like, so the internship program kind of started up again, and we started bringing on a lot more interns. And even though I was just a writer, I managed the interns. I was the only female there at the time, and a lot of the men that I worked with were not the best at organizing. And so
no, that's so uncharacteristic.
So
for some men, okay, guys, I get it.
Yeah.
Sorry,
don't generalize, Liz.
I won't generalize. Okay.
No, so it was kind of something that I was like, yeah, I'll do. Like, how hard is it to make a schedule and book people in for interviews? So I had been doing that, and I think that was really good because it kind of showed them that like I could be a leader. They even let me like do some of the interviews, and like kind of I got to sit in and like kind of choose who we wanted to have on as interns. So I kind of started just slowly picking up more and more responsibilities. And then eventually they kind of just said, okay, well, do you want to be an associate editor? And I said, sure. So I became an associate editor, and I worked there.
Things move fast at startups, don't they?
Things go very fast.
Very quick, yeah.
So I became...
what kind of time period would that have been in? Like internship to being like the assistant editor?
Probably like within the year.
Wow.
Maybe even less than that. Like, yeah, definitely within the year. And then after, there were 2 other editors, and one of them left, and then another one left to like pursue music or something. So then I became the editor-in-chief or the managing editor. I really don't like the title chief. Editor-in-chief. I don't like it. So I just say managing editor, but that's kind of...
what about editress?
Editress. I don't know. I feel like I have like a weird thing for like labels. I just don't love them.
I'd imagine it's probably because like it's a lot all at once, mm-hmm. and it's like a big title, and sometimes I don't know if you like, for me, I know when things like that happen, I'm like, okay, because it feels weird to think of yourself as like the head of something when it moves quickly, even though obviously that means that you're doing a good job. It sometimes is like, do I want to take that on? Is that really like intense? And like,
Yeah. It's not, I mean, yeah, that's a good point. I feel like for me, it was also that I've seen people get really like petty over labels before and care so much about their labels and be like, well, I need the title. And it like grosses me out. Because it's like, well, your job who cares? Like, you're doing the same job, you're getting paid. It's like, what does it matter what the bottom of your email says?
Right. If it was a little less, are you going to try like a little less than what you should? Or you're not going to give it your all if it doesn't say chief or like.
Exactly.
That shouldn't affect it.
Dictate how you do your job. So that's kind of like one of the things is I just really didn't like that. And I don't like that it kind of creates a hierarchy, right? So especially among, like, obviously we're not going to be bringing interns in and they're not going to be like running the show. Like, they understand that they have to go through me for pitches and they, I don't need to like hang a title over their head for that. Obviously they understand. So there is, in a way, there's always going to be a bit of a hierarchy. But even with among like the upper staff, like, I just think it's so weird to be in a place where like you've got an editor-in-chief and then there's like an executive editor and then an assistant editor and then like an assistant editor, and eventually you're just like
assistant to the assistant of the
assistant
editor.
to the assistant to the editor.
Yeah.
And eventually it's very much like that. It's like on The Office, it's like what does this mean? Like, when a new person comes in, why do you need to be bumped up to executive? Or
right.
Like, it just, that part never made sense to me.
So you just continued with the editor title or managing?
Managing. I say, because essentially, I mean, that's what I do. I manage, I oversee the magazine, and that's what I've been doing now for like the last year. Mm-hmm. In that position. I've been in Plaid Zebra for about 3, because I believe my internship started in 2015.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so how did you find yourself then at like the doorstep of Fully Exposed? Well, not at the doorstep, because like you came up with the like title and everything, but do you want to go into a little bit about what the podcast is about and like maybe how Plaid Zebra connects with it?
So back when I invented podcasts, no,
sly devil.
So Liz, you had approached me and talked about Evoke, which is a podcasting company that you've had for quite some time now, ish.
Yeah,
like you've had your
media
podcast.
Yeah, I've had my podcast, Faking It, and the media company that like is connected with Evoke is something that was created within like under the umbrella of Plaid Zebra. Like, there's a lot of like, things that go on with making of like new startups under other startups, but essentially it's like services that are just digital services that we offer. So Evoke Media came out of that, and then from that it was just like this network of podcasts that I sort of was hoping would be a thing one day. And Evoke Media has been around for like a minute.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff within stuff, I guess.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what happened. I was really excited to jump on board and try a podcast and get to have my hand in co-producing it. And you've been really great with like giving me kind of free rein to choose my guests and choose my topics and kind of craft that the way that I would like. How that kind of started, it's funny that it's like a thing now, because I can't even remember back to sitting there being like, it doesn't have a name, it doesn't have a logo, like what are my topics going to be? Like, even though that was
I
like,
turned to you one day, like it was just like I swiveled in my chair and was like, hey Jess, and you sit sort of like on an awkward angle to me, and so like I saw the side and you're like, yep. Like, would you ever like host a podcast? And you went, yeah. And like, I'm pretty sure that's like
right.
where it was. And then we like met with our boss on like a couch, and you had a list of like amazing topics with people. You're like, yeah, I could get that done. And it was just like great topics.
Well, thank you.
I was like, okay, like this could be a thing. And then we just like named the baby, and the baby's growing.
Yeah. So yeah, that is what happened. It's weird because it's again one of those things with startups. at the rate that like time moves, it's so crazy to see how much progress and how much you get done in such a short little time. But I had started coming up with the topics. That was the first thing. And the place that I visited when I wanted to choose the topics was Plaid Zebra. So some of the stories that I had previously covered on Plaid Zebra was kind of my starting place for choosing topics. So there's a little bit of like an overlapping there where I've interviewed people for the podcast that have maybe like written stories for Plaid Zebra or that fit into a topic that I've already researched and written about for Plaid Zebra. The reason being is that it still very much has that kind of like unconventional edge, right? These are things that aren't typically talked about all the time. They're lifestyles that maybe people have never heard of or that are very ignorant about. And again, it stems back to that idea of just trying to understand people a little bit better so that we're less ignorant, because ignorance breeds hate, and that's not good. So that's
we want less of that.
We want less of that.
Like
we want more love and hugs.
we want like less of.
So that was kind of where it all stemmed from. And I had come up with a list of like 18 topics, and I sat on the couch with you and we kind of went through them. And and then we just started. We had to choose the name, we had to choose the logo, and it kind of just snowballed from there. So that's basically it. And like now that it's something, and we've started recording and we've started releasing the episodes, and we've officially launched, now it's just like you got to keep the wheels spinning. Every day I'm like thinking of, oh, maybe this could be a guest, or oh, this would be a really interesting topic, and just trying to keep it all within that vein of what don't we know? What are we scared to talk about? What are the questions that we have in the back of our heads but like won't say out loud, right? What are the kind of hidden stories that people don't get to share with the world because they're not given that platform?
Right. And it's like sort of in the vein of the taboo, like a taboo subject or a taboo thing. And taboo meaning like what society might have labeled to be taboo, but like something you're willing to just sort of break open and like look at it in a different light. And so to that, what would you like, what are you going to tackle? What kinds of things do you think are to come that you'd like to take on?
Anything and everything. That's such a vague answer. I'd like to say that nothing is off limits, because I haven't found my limit yet, but I'm sure there are some things. I don't want people to feel uncomfortable. I don't ever want to feel like my guests, like I'm pressuring them into getting like some juicy story, for listens. That's not the environment that I want to create. However, I think people know when they come to the show. I've been really lucky, or we've been really lucky with all the guests we've got, in terms of everybody just being so open and all honest and willing to be vulnerable in front of strangers, which is amazing. And I think it's because they know what we're trying to achieve and they can get behind it.
Yeah, we're offering a platform so that there's like, come on in, we're going to talk about these things and don't be fucking freaked out. Like,
so I think it's a matter of just making sure that branding always stays true to itself, so that, eventually we kind of just become synonymous with that. And when we do invite guests, they're like, oh, okay, yeah, this is like a safe space. And these people are, they're on my side. They're on my team. They're trying to let the world hear me and listen to my story, and just make it so that we all know like a little bit more about each other. So no, I haven't come across anything yet that I would say is off limits. However, in terms of, you asked, this isn't really answering your question. You asked what I want to tackle.
Or who?
I think so, like some of the upcoming topics, I guess, that I don't know like if we'll record them for next season or when they're going to be coming up, but I want to do one on political correctness, which I feel like is a difficult topic to tackle because it's so, I don't know if it's necessarily controversial. Well, yeah, there's two very distinct sides, and there's a lot of debate about a lot of stuff, and people can get really, you don't want to step on any toes, right? And people kind of have their own sensitivities about certain things. But I do think it's something that needs to be talked about. And
yeah, because there's validity as well to both of those sides of that argument, for and against, I think.
Totally. And so there's like a couple topics that's only my concern right now, is like how to tackle them, because I don't know if I should have like two different people on and hear two different sides, or
and like moderated, or like,
yeah, and it would be like a debate, or so there's kind of a couple upcoming topics that's been the challenge so far, is wondering how to lay this out, because it's not as clear cut as like with our episode with anorexia and our guest Adam. It was me talking to him about his story and his experiences with anorexia. And then, of course, yes, we related that to how does the way that masculinity has been constructed within society, how does that affect things like mental illness for men? That is a very real issue. So even though his story was so personal to him, his story relates to a much larger issue that's very important to talk about,
right,
and to discuss. So that was a little easier in terms of deciding how I wanted to do that one. But there are some upcoming ones where there's definitely challenges with thinking, how are we going to lay this out? How are we, especially when it's an issue that is that controversial?
Yeah, and touchy.
Yeah. But I mean, that's also what makes it fun. Like I said, with taking that the philosophy class, I kind of go for the controversial, because I think things are controversial for a reason. And I think it's important to hear both sides. And I'm not saying that you should change your opinion or agree, with everything I say or with everything my guests say or any of that. But I think it's just important to know what exists, to just be as like educated as possible. You can never be overeducated.
Yeah, I agree with that. We're going to go into a lightning round, my friend.
So
here
fun.
We go. I don't, maybe our awesome editor, Aronde, will put some music over this. I'm thinking like something like that Stranger Things track, that, something like that.
Oh, I was thinking like the final countdown.
Oh, that's way better. Let me just get the copyright to that real quick.
Yeah.
Okay, ready?
Yes.
Dogs or pigs?
Pigs.
Friends.
Oh, wait, for like having as a pet or
Yeah.
just...
Yeah.
Oh,
Dogs or pigs as a pet? Having a dog or a pig?
Oh my God, this isn't a lightning round. Still pigs.
Just gonna go into a dissertation about this. Okay, the TV show Friends or The Office?
Oh, frick.
I thought that would be easy for you.
No, it isn't. It's because Friends was like my very first favorite TV show ever. So it's always gonna have that like pull on my heartstrings. So I almost feel like I'm stabbing it in the back.
Okay, favorite Gilmore Girls character?
Oh, easy. Jess.
Life-changing moment?
Oh, God. That's not lightning round.
I had to throw one in there for you.
Life-changing moment. I guess when I got into Ryerson, I guess when I made the big move.
Favorite novel ever read?
Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban.
Oh, straight up. That's a good one.
Numero
and,
trois.
Oh, yeah. Alternate career, if you could choose one.
Oh, I would hands down be an event planner.
Oh, well, we could just do that right now. But yeah, so where can we find Fully Exposed on social media?
Everywhere. You can follow Fully Exposed on Instagram.
And it's at Fully X Podcast, right?
Yes,
So
at Fully
EX.
X Podcast. You can follow Fully Exposed on Facebook. We have a Facebook page. Again, I think if you just type in Fully Exposed to the search bar, you'll find it.
Yep.
But again, if you're searching via the URL, it's also Fully X Podcast, because, fun fact, did you know that you can't say Fully Exposed on Facebook?
Oh, have you discovered this? Because it's like, what, like meant to be a sexual thing?
I guess when I typed in Fully Exposed Podcast, they said you can't have this name because one or more of the words like is banned or like inappropriate. And then I took out exposed and it let me use it. So it was the word exposed.
Oh, well, That's everything that we're against.
Censorship. Yes. It belongs in the home and
that.
nowhere else.
Okay, great. And you can also, like, Fully Exposed is an Evoke Media podcast. So everybody remember that name. You can look at our website at www.evokecast, like the thing you'd wear on your arm or your leg if you broke it, evokecast.com. And you can find Evoke on Facebook and Instagram as well if you want to follow the network, get the updates on all of the shows that are underneath the Evoke Media podcast network. So that's Faking It, my podcast. There's Fully Exposed, which is Jess's podcast. And there's a couple of new ones that are coming out. And we're going to just keep building content. So I want to say thank you guys for listening today. I'm Liz. And thanks a lot, Jess.
You're welcome. Also, one quick thing. I should say you can also find Fully Exposed on Twitter.
Okay. On Twitter. Nice. There you go. Cool. All right. Thanks.
Thank you.
That's our show. Thanks for tuning in this week to Fully Exposed. I hope your ass has been sufficiently educated.
This has been an Evoke Media podcast.